to Thrive in Your Third Act, the show where you'll hear practical tips and real life stories to help you call forward the best version of yourself in your 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond. Hi, I'm your host, Joanna Klein. I am the creator of Journey to Legacy, where we believe your life story is worthy and deserving of being recalled, reframed, and remembered. So if you or anyone else you know has ever suffered from depression, you know how debilitating it can be. Today's guest has been through the darkest hours and has pulled herself out of it and has a very heroic and inspiring story to share. Jeanine Rivers is an author, speaker, professional vocalist, and emotional CPR practitioner. She is founder and CEO of Illuminate Your Dreams, where she encourages women to build a more comprehensive strategy for their future that will ignite their vision and their voice with the world. Jeanine, welcome.
Hi, how's everyone? Thank you, Joanna.
So nice to have you here. We are new friends, being both of us being show hosts on Win Win Women. So I love the fact that our paths crossed and we have this opportunity to be here because I am all about storytelling.
Yes, yes.
Well, and let's start with that because as I've shared with everyone today, you have a big story to share of what you were able to pull yourself out of. So if you would share that with us, I'd love to hear it.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I'm going to say majority of my life, I suffered from depression. I didn't know what it was, and in the 70s and 80s, you really didn't talk about it that much. But as I grew older, I really developed strong suicidal ideation. I was thrusted in an environment that I was not used to, coming from an extremely controlled environment and leaving home and opening up to a whole new world. And, when I left home, I lost a lot of friends, family. So I was really alone, in the world and was looking for love in all the wrong places, just feeling really down, helpless, worthless. And some of the relationships that I developed when I left home ended, and it made it worse, psychiatrist to psychiatrist, therapist to therapist, medication, no medication, and so depressed. And being 21 years old, I didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel, no light. It was just only darkness. It was a very dark emotional place. And I tried to take my life by suicide. And
what age were you when?
I was 21. I was 21 years old. And, I planned it. And, and when I attempted to take my life by suicide, it was really interesting for me. Of course, I'm still here, but the journey around the whole surrounding, it was something, divine intervention there. I remember, I can remember being in the hospital. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. I was in a coma for 1 week. And when I woke up and everything, I remember the doctor telling me, if we had found you 15 minutes later, just 15, you would not be here. Okay. And what is so interesting about that time is my parents treated me horribly. Like, I can't believe you did this. You came from a good home, blah, blah, blah. And I remember being treated so horribly. We're not going to buy you any flowers. Don't ever tell anyone this happened. And so when I left that hospital, I left like nothing had ever happened.
Mm,
And through the course of time, I kept it secret. I didn't tell anyone. And it was still just a very dark time for me. I gained like, I got up to 472 pounds. Food was my drug. And just a wave of just depression and not feeling good about myself and always feeling hopeless, always feeling that darkness. But then as I grew, when I was 23, I had my daughter and she was my little shining light. So she was my reason for wanting to stay.
mm,
But me wanting to stay was never about me. It was about,
wow.
I had a child.
Mhm.
So that darkness, that dark pit, it really stayed a long time and it affected all of the decisions I had to make during my journey. Um, and it never really, feeling this darkness never really allowed me to be who I could completely be because I didn't know who I was.
Mhm.
And I didn't like, when I looked in the mirror, I'm like, ooh, I didn't like that girl that I saw.
Mhm.
So I didn't, that's basically, the story of the darkness.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and would it be okay for us to unpack that a little bit
Oh,
further?
definitely. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
And I was struck when you talked about being depressed as a child, because I remember crying myself to sleep at night, making up stories though about a little girl, almost like a fairy tale story, and I was crying for her. And it took me a long time. And in fact, my life story writing has helped me get there, is to recognize I was that little girl, but I couldn't cry for myself. And so I'm curious for you, like what it looked like when you talk about being depressed as a little girl, like how did you know that you were?
Our stories, Joanna, are like so close because I would cry. I can remember having to be in bed by 8 o'clock. And I can remember being in my bed and my bed was against the wall and there was this window there. And I would open up the shade a little and pretend like I was walking down the street and it was the street, all you could see is the street lights and the moon. And I would pretend to be happy. I pretended, I loved the movie Singing in the Rain. And so I would always, because I'm a musician, I would always pretend like I was in that spotlight singing. So that was my fairy tale to make me happy. But I would cry to myself to sleep. And what was so amazing about that time is I didn't know why I was crying. I just knew I felt icky inside and I couldn't describe it. But I used to cry and I used to just feel sad all the time. And now it was depression.
Mhm,
And
mhm. I
I
know, I
didn't,
don't
yeah,
realize. Mhm,
yeah. And my mom would always ask me, what's wrong? And I would tell her, I don't feel well.
mhm.
What does that mean? She never asked me. She just thought my stomach, I didn't feel well. It was emotionally, I didn't feel well.
Yeah,
So
when we're young, we aren't able to put words to the emotions. We don't understand how it
right.
is, why we're feeling that way, and so we're carrying this with us. So I'm also curious because I I know that people who have not been through the level of depression, the suicidal kind of depression, my sense is that it's hard to really understand what that feels like and
Mm.
what's going on in one's mind when they decide that life isn't worth living. And my gosh, 21 years old is so young. There's so much opportunity. So if you could describe that a little bit more, um,
I,
go a little bit deeper.
for me, what I've learned from all the trainings that I've gone through and speaking from being a facilitator for a suicide prevention group, what I've learned is all of our stories are the same yet different. And one common denominator is that feeling of not being wanted, that feeling of not being loved, feeling, being rejected by other people and not being accepted for who you are. You know, can you just imagine just everything about you being rejected and people wanting to mold you into what they feel you should be. And for me, it was because I didn't want to do it the way everyone else did. um, and when I wanted to be me, I was rejected. So I thought something was wrong with me. Now, there's a piece of the puzzle that's missing when I say, let me go back a little bit. I grew up in a very controlled environment. I grew up in an extremely religious home. Okay. And my whole environment, we were all in the same religion. So I tell everyone it's an emotional cult. All my friends were the same religion. Everything we did were with people within our church, and I didn't really get to see family. Okay, so we became a different household up until the age I was 10. So I had all this love of all my family and friends, and that was taken from me when I decided this is not what I want to do anymore. And that was like when I was 19. So I didn't know what that whole world out there was like. So I kind of got pushed out there. And so literally, Joanna, I had no one. My parents turned their back on me. All of my childhood friends I had no one. So can you imagine that feeling of I had no one, so I must be really worthless. I have no one. So it was that dark feeling of, well, you're no one, because that's the way people are treating you. So if you're no one, then you just really don't have a desire. You don't, no love, no hugs, no nothing. It's, yeah, the human bond was not there for me. So I like, forget it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I, now that as you look back and you have these years of wisdom and life is very different for you now, when you look back at that time of having made a decision that this life that you were living with your family and with the religion wasn't for you, and you took this step outside of that,
Right.
How do you describe that to yourself now?
Ooh, I feel I I still feel the same way. That song by Diana Ross, I'm coming out. I'm coming out. It just, I was like, here I am in this whole new world. And at first I didn't understand it. Now it's like I was in a box. And I just, what a wonderful world. What a wonderful world.
Because I want to honor your courage to step out of this container and and your trust in yourself that this wasn't right for you.
Yes.
That you actually did that at a younger age than many of us do, of stepping away from the mold that isn't yours. And so that's a story of courage. That's a story of independence. That's a story of self-trust.
I never thought of it that way, self-trust. And Joanna, can I add, this is what I found out now in my 50s, in my third act, as you say. I love that term, by the way. This is what I've learned in my third act. That little girl that was crying in the bed knew then that she didn't want to be in that box. And she was forced to be in that box because she was 10 years old. What was she going to do? Run away? So my whole life I was in this box. And when I had the courage to leave the box, I basically lost everything, because I had, when you're that young, so I really did lose everything. I had to start all over emotionally and develop new relationships.
Yeah, I think you're speaking a universal truth here for those of us who, like, I consider myself kind of the black sheep of the family, that I didn't fit in with the norm, and it wasn't as controlling as an environment as you described, but it's like I didn't fit in. And so as a result, then it was like, that was probably part of the depression, that was the one that was what didn't work for me. I mean, that's what created this like feeling of alienation, of not belonging. And yet I didn't get that.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And so for those who didn't feel that they were part of the family, who didn't feel that they fit in, then, then that there, if someone had depression during those times, and then that when I stepped out too, going to college, I lost my identity. I didn't know who I was. It sounds like you had the same thing.
I I know someone who had that happen, but when I stepped out of that box, I think that was part of the problem, Joanna. I didn't know who I was.
Mm-hmm.
I knew who I was deep down, but everyone was telling me their version of who I was. And it was like, that self-doubt. But yet I knew, I'm like, I know who I am. But everybody was like, no, that blah, blah, blah. And so I was listening to all the other voices.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. So you said that having your daughter gave you a reason for living, but actually before we get there, this whole experience of making a decision to take your life, would you share a little bit more about that? And did you let anyone know? Was it, did you have a cry for help within that?
Oh, that's a good question, because usually there is a cry for help. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a good question. I'm going to say I did have a cry for help. I was dating someone at the time, and my this is really interesting. Thank you for unpacking this with me. My cry for help was calling him and crying, being so depressed I would cry, and he would say, well, what's wrong? And I would go, I don't know, I don't feel good. Mm-hmm. That was always my answer. I just feel icky. And that was my cry for help all the time. And that was my cry for help. But before, when I decided what I was going to do, I told no one. I didn't tell anyone, no one at all. I didn't care.
Wow. How did you get discovered?
Oh, I woke up in the middle of it. So, I woke up, I took pills, and they say a lot of times you shouldn't say how you did it, but I think it's important for someone to know that that's what I did. But it's interesting. I woke up, and the doctor told me, it's amazing that you woke up. So when I woke up, I crawled into the hallway of my apartment building. And as soon as I got in the hallway, I passed back out. And I want to just say that my apartment was like, here was the wall. My apartment was here. It was a dead end. Nobody hardly ever came around that corner. And just by chance, the manager of the building was walking through for a reason and found me. Yeah. But 15 minutes later, I would not be here talking to you.
Angels on your shoulder.
Oh yeah, big time.
Wow, that's powerful. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the climb out then, and the journey since. And thank you so much for going deeper with me on that.
Oh no, yeah, that's an open book. Mm-hmm. I want to help somebody, Mm-hmm. But I'm sorry.
Yeah. So now, you have your daughter. You're still. She becomes the purpose. She becomes what fills you up, but you still are on this journey of not recognizing that it's up to you to fill yourself up ultimately. So right. How did that unfold?
Well, they say sometimes I don't know, history and habits repeat themselves because I was, the only way I knew to be a mother, I repeated what I was taught by my mother. So the journey of being a mother for me was bittersweet because people have to realize when you try to attempt your take your own life, and if you're a survivor like me, it doesn't mean that the same issues or emotions or feelings that you had that took you to that place, that you still don't have that struggle.
Mhm.
So the whole time I'm raising her, I'm struggling emotionally, but I have a daughter I have to take care of. I have an amazing career. A marriage I was in was not the greatest, but so again, I had no choice but to keep pushing. And um, I was a good mother in the sense that, I had a daughter who was in a good school, the very good middle class life that I gave her. So she did very well, but emotionally, she suffered like me. And you know what I would hear from her? I I could see that she was down, and I would say, "Honey, what's wrong?" "I don't know. I just don't feel good." And still, I wasn't having that light bulb moment. So when she went off to college, she lost her identity because she didn't know. So when you said that, it was like a little light. Our relationship is very good now, but it was hard being a mom because I never was my cup was always empty. But yet I had this daughter, I had to take care of her. I did the best I can, but I still struggled with that depression.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, it's not, I think that's a great point that you make. It's like, it doesn't just all of a sudden the switch is flipped and now
Right,
it's done. There's an ongoing process. So,
right.
and here you are now in, it has have your own business. You're helping women. Give us the quick version of how, when the switch did flip for you and how it is for you now.
The switch flipped for me because there's too many women who traveled the road that I have, that all of us have. So, and I could see um, that they just felt so hopeless. And some succeeded in taking their own life, and some are still with us. And if I could just show them the 13 mountains, literally 13, I counted them, that I had to climb
Mhm.
to get to the other side of that light, travel through that darkness and get to the other side. I want to help them. So I provide that safe place, and I share my stories and how I did it, and so that they can find their own way of doing it. So it's just showing people, just being very transparent and just willing to let them see me in all aspects.
So is it 13 mountains part of the process that you offer in your work with women?
That's what I'm working on.
Uh,
Yeah, but I never thought about calling, because there's literally 13 huge
mm,
mountains in my life that I had to survive to be here today. Health wise, yeah. So I'm working on developing that.
I like that.
Yeah.
Uh, and in your the work that you tell us a little bit about, in addition to, the work that you do, like if now, if you have, like we all do, bad days, we have good days, we have bad days.
Yes.
What, how do you handle your bad days now?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, I meditate, I journal, and I do a lot of deep breathing because when my mom died, it was really hard for me. She died in November of 2020, and I went to a dark place that I never thought I could ever go to again, Joanna. I never thought. And I had to like really tap into all of the things that I've learned and just so I meditate, I journal, I only allow that positive energy in my life. And I phone a friend. I have friends now that they know who I really am, and they love me anyway. So I can call them and say, look, this is happening to me right now. Can you have 15 minutes just to hear me out? So you have to work it through.
And get the support. And obviously you came to a new place with your relationship with your mom, at least. I don't know what happened in terms of your dad, but
Yeah.
what shifted for you to be able to have that relationship now with, and I'm sorry for your loss,
Right.
what shifted for you to be able to have that relationship with her?
Because I've come to realize that we're all imperfect parents. But then when I thought she was perfect, because I mean, she's a mother, right? I mean, everything she says is right, but everything she does is right. But coming to realize, learning her story and talking to my uncles and seeing what my mother went through, I'm like, she couldn't give of herself to me. There's no way. She went through worse than I ever did. So as I think being in my 50s in my third act, and you get that compassion and that understanding, that's what did it for me. I'm like, you were a very good mom, because you held on tight, and you could have tried to take your own life, because she suffered from depression her whole life. But you held on, even if it was for me, you held on, and that takes strength and courage.
That's beautiful. And that's definitely something that we explore in Journey to Legacy. It's that building of compassion. Obviously, the first step is compassion for ourselves. And once we're able to feel the compassion and forgive ourselves, and then we start looking at our stories from another perspective. And that's exactly what you brought to the table with your story with your mom, and starting to get a wider perspective of what was going on, and compassion for her, and understanding that she's got her own story, and not taking it personally how it is that she lived her life.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's beautiful. So as we come to a close today, is there any last bits of advice that you would give anyone who is watching today, and also if they want to know more, where is it that they can find you?
Well, one bit of advice, or one strong piece of encouragement: in the darkness, there is always, always, always a speck of light. Always a speck. You may not always see it, but that speck of light is always there in your darkest moments of life. And Joanna, that's why I love working with women. I literally hold their hand and walk with them through that journey. And they can reach me at Jeannine at illuminateyourdreams.com, or go to illuminateyourdreams.com.
Great. And when is your Win-Win Women show on?
Jeannine's Voice is on Saturdays. I start out the day for everybody. So I'm on 7 a.m. Pacific. I'm the first show of the day. And I kick off the energy and the encouragement on Saturday mornings.
Great. Yeah. Well, I so appreciate you being here with us today, Jeannine, and sharing so vulnerably and honestly about a very difficult time in your life. So thank you for saying yes, and for sharing.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was a pleasure. Thank you, Joanna.
Yes, I love it. So for those of you who are watching, I always love to give a writing prompt for you, something inspired by what was the theme of the show today. And so today's writing prompt is: when was a time that you pulled yourself out of one of your darkest hours? When was a time you pulled yourself out of one of your darkest hours? And what did you learn about yourself as a result? There's so much wisdom when we look back and see how we were courageous, we were strong, we went through something and came on the other side of it. And so it's a time to recognize that, to honor that, and to see those strengths. And if you love the idea, curious about the idea of going deeper into your life stories and to find the compassion for yourself, to find the compassion for others in your life, to learn more about who you are and recognize your journey, then I invite you to visit my website, journeytolegacy.com. And there is a free gift there, a starter kit called Write Your Authentic Story Starter Kit. So I invite you to check that out and begin writing your stories. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.